Are you still poring over all your fantasy guides, looking for that one special player that's going to put you over the top in your Yahoo Fantasy League? Well, this is part 2 of our fantasy hockey special on the Average Albertan Podcast. Episode 1 focused on types of Yahoo Fantasy Leagues. So if you're new to playing fantasy hockey, maybe go back and watch that one first. This episode is going to focus on the Dynasty Leagues. These are leagues that carry over from year to year. So it's not just build a good team for 1 year, you want to build a team that's going to be consistent. And Frank and I are going to have a discussion about Dynasty Leagues. Frank is a manager with a 72.5 win percentage in fantasy hockey. He has close to 1,000 wins and 45 trophies in fantasy hockey. He knows what he's talking about. We will talk about roster construction. We will talk about how to set up a farm team for your league and different sites that you can use, goaltending situation, and some of the risky trades that you might have to make if you're in a win now situation. I hope you enjoy episode number 2. Let's get back to that discussion with Frank and fantasy hockey. Yeah.
We play for fun. None of my leagues are cash leagues, so I play for fun. So winning is fun.
Yeah. I think if I remember, I mean, that was 7 years ago, but I don't think it was I think it was kind of a 3-way deal. I think I had the second pick, which would have been Jack Eichel. And then I traded that and a couple pieces for the first overall pick. And then I traded that.
Okay.
Yeah. And you know what? I lost out on McDavid, and that does hurt, but at least I won that trophy. And then the next year I came second in that same league.
Exactly.
So it did keep me around, and then I kind of, tapered off because of work and everything. I did win a few others in other leagues, but it's been a dry spell for 5 years. But I'm getting back into it now, hoping to be competitive. I think I have a really good, strong farm team. And with a Dynasty League, Frank has set up a Pro Boards site for managers to go and
West did. I'm taking.
Oh, West? This is West's? Okay.
Yeah, I have a co-commish in all my leagues. It's West. We've been playing for a very long time together. 2008, I think we first met. So to go back to your trade, that's what fantasy managers have to weigh, the short term versus the long term. Because long term, Eichel and McDavid are nice, but you have to look at the short term. It's like, how important is winning versus just having fun and having. In your case, you would have had your favorite player, because I remember now. Yeah, you went from 2-1.
Yeah.
With the idea of drafting McDavid, the homeboy, but then you shockingly traded that pick away.
I know, but and I remember getting some advice from you at that time, and giving me the whole "you're in a win now" situation, and I really didn't expect the manager. I can't remember who it was that had Holtby. Plus, I got some other.
That was Hartford in our league. So he actually traded for both the first and second pick.
Yes.
And he got Eichel and McDavid, and this was 2014-15 season. I think the trophies in 15 is 2014-15 season. So this is happening in September 2014, I believe. Since that time, he's never won. He's competing now. He's close, but he's never won, even though he traded for both Eichel and McDavid.
And he still has both of them right now. He's got Eichel and McDavid on his roster. He's got Hellebuck, so he does have, a top.
He's got Vasilevsky, who he traded Kuznetsov for, while Vasilevsky was in the AHL. And he gave a proven 80-point player for the potential of Vasilevsky. 2 years later, Vasilevsky, or 1 year later, he came in. But he's got Vasilevsky, McDavid, Eichel, Hellebuck, Matt Murray in this Pittsburgh's day when he actually played and didn't get hurt. But
Yeah.
his biggest problem is balance. His team is not balanced.
Yeah, and that's the thing again with a dynasty league. I mean, to give credit to Hartford, he is trending upwards. He is on an upward trend. He is a diamond performer, so he's getting some really good results. Not many trophies. Probably hasn't been playing for a long period of time. But when you have McDavid and Eichel and Hellebuck and Vasilevsky, that's not enough to win a trophy. You need to have that balanced, consistent lineup, and the categories are really important. You need your face-off wins. You need your hits. You need your blocks. It's not just goals and assists like it was in the past, Frank.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay.
it's just crazy. Like most fantasy managers will say, the person who wins the trade is the manager who gets the best player. And that's a rule of thumb. And in life, rule of thumbs are just that. They don't work most of the time. It's a rule of thumb. Rule of thumb is you can retire on 70% of your income. Well, that's a rule of thumb. You know, in many cases, the team not getting the best player wins the trade, and that's has to do with the results from making that trade.
And one
And
thing
it
I like that's cool about Fantasy Yahoo is I can go back to 2015. I'm on the 2015 page right now, and you can see that I beat Smack Ice 8-5 in the final. In fact, I beat Frank in the semifinal. So I was able to beat Frank, who had a bye. I won the quarterfinal, slaughtered, Gruber not, and even the trade is still recorded on the site, which I think is really cool. And it's cool to kind of look back on it. So within 48 hours, 3 teams over 10 players switching teams. Hartford, Eichel, Ekblad, Sod, and Morrissey, who was on my farm. I got McDavid, Eberle, Molson, Shattenkirk, Reinhardt, and Lazar. Again, as an Edmonton fan, I was going after the Oil Kings. And then to another team, Stamkos, Voracek, Krug, and Waugh, 3-way deal involving all these players. And then I would make another deal trading McDavid back to Hartford for Holtby and a few other pieces.
oh,
Yeah. So pretty cool that you can still find these old archives of your fantasy leagues. I forgot about that you can do that.
yep, it's very fun to go look back and see what happened. So
Yeah. So Frank, with the pro board site that either commissions or vice commissions, co-commissions can set up, this is where you can keep track of all the players in your dynasty league, their farm teams.
correct.
And you can set up a simple Word doc, and on that Word doc, you can keep track of all the players. Now,
Yes.
explain to the viewer how a farm system works in terms of fantasy hockey.
Yeah. So if you go to Fantrax, they take care of it. That's the beauty of Fantrax and where Yahoo is falling behind, because you can designate players as farms on Fantrax, and that's why when you look at ownership, um, like Quinn and Buffalo will have 7% ownership on Yahoo and 52% on Fantrax. That's because of the farm possibility. So if you want to do Dynasty on Yahoo, you have to use a third party because um, it's too complicated to manage, because you could use the NA positions for your farm, but then if a player gets called up, a fantasy manager on a light scheduled day, he could transfer the NA on his roster. So it's and then not graduate him, wait, and it's just too complicated. So pro boards, you can select and have different categories. So what we have is a master list, because before adding anybody on Yahoo that's younger than 25, which is our limit of age, for any farm players. Oh, that's why I give advice. Before you add anybody under 25, go here. You get the master list. It's alphabetical order. Go check if that player is there. And then for each team, we have their farm. So Glenn, myself, and the 10 other managers can go see what they have, the trade picks they still have, trade picks that they traded. So we have the next 2 years of of picks, and then see what they're missing. There's some positional requirements on the farms I created. So it's 14 players. And then there's a bunch of bench spots. So that's to manage. If I want to engage Glenn on trades, you can do it with the main roster, but you can also do it on the farm. So I go here, I look at what Glenn has on his farm, or he goes on my farm, and then we can make a roster trade, including these players. And as Glenn alluded to before, well, I use my form as currency to improve my team this year.
Right. And this is a dimension of fantasy hockey that I think a lot of managers aren't really part of. And I think if you're a true hockey fan and you love statistics and you love drafting and fantasy leagues and you're dedicated and you're always going to check in, this is a no-brainer. This is the type of league that you should belong to. But it does take patience. It takes uh, consistency, and it takes you to contact other managers and work out deals. I'm kind of proud of my farm, although it's not going to win me a trophy now. But because I haven't won many recently, it's something, okay, I got to build up my farm. I'll sacrifice a few seasons. I'm busy with work. Let's build up that farm. And I don't know, Frank, as a fantasy dynasty guru, what do you see with my farm here? Do you see potential?
Yes, I'm too old, so I'm gonna go. I'm gonna pull it up on my screen. Hold on, I can't see your screen. It's too small. I'm too old now. So give me 2 seconds.
And as Frank's doing that, I'll have to mention that probably Frank is the manager that I've traded with the most. Um, like I said, he when he wants to win, he's very aggressive with his trades, but very fair. In fact, sometimes he may even lose, immediately or down the line on these trades. But a lot of my farm acquisitions over the year has been for Frank because he's tends to always be in that win now mode.
Yes. So yeah, I trade a lot because you know I want to win this year. So looking at your farm, and that's the key when you have a farm. As fans, we like to criticize our teams. Their drafting sucks. They can't develop players. Blah blah blah. But the key in fantasy hockey when you have farms is know when to cut bait, because players bust out all the time. The toughest position is goalies. Second toughest position is defenseman. Why is defenseman the second toughest? It's because there's only 6 per team. Goalies, there's only 2 per team. And goalies are very difficult to project, depending on which leagues they play. Defensemen they have less opportunity to get playing time in the NHL. Forwards, since there's 12, you can start on the fourth and third line and move your way up, and you at least get competition. So that's why, in order, forwards are the easiest to track. But even for forwards, that's at one point you have to cut bait. Um, so having said that, goalies, Kosa, he's a tier 1 prospect. Hoffer, tier 1 prospects. Why? Because you also have to look at what's in the NHL. Because if you have Dylan Garand, which is your last one, he's a New York Ranger. There's a certain goalie who's 26 over there who's going to be the goalie for the next 8 years, unless he breaks his knee. So he cannot be as good as he is a tier one because he has somebody in front of him, and goalie prospect trades rarely work out. They do sometimes, but I look at the team and why is Hoffer tier one? Because Binnington basically lost his job to Husso last year, and because of cap, because of his contract, well, they got rid of Husso and he's back to being number one. But he's got a couple of years left, so Hoffer will have an opportunity. And I keep saying, every player that's good has the brass ring that comes to them. They either grab it and hold on, or they grab it and they slip off it. So eventually he's going to have his time and day. And then you have Kochetkov. That's a Carolina goalie, if my memory
Carolina. Yeah.
serves correct. He's also a tier one goalie because Carolina doesn't have any goalies signed long term. Both Anderson and Ranta are UFAs at the end of the year. So he has plenty of opportunities. So he's a tier one. Garin is another tier. I won't quantify it. I don't rank all the goalies. So is he a tier two, tier three? I don't follow all the goalies that much.
Yeah.
Europeans, when they come over, it's all adapting to the ring size. And it's not just the forwards and the defensemen. The angles for the goalies are different. And you look at Markstrom. Markstrom was a grade A tier one prospect for a long time. He was stuck behind a pretty good goalie in Florida. But when he came over and you look at his career, I don't know if you want to bring it up, um, but he had a very hard time in adapting to uh, to the NHL, to the North American rinks. So you look at he had a lot of adapting to do. He was doing great when he played in the AHL. Then in the NHL, not that good. So it took him a long time before he played regularly. So it's 2017, 2018 for the Canucks when he played 60 games. So that's like 5 years ago, and he's 32 now. So 27 years old before he got adapted to the North American rink. And that's the thing with goalies. But Markstrom was what Wallstead and Kosa are, what Askarov was, what Spencer Knight was. Uh, but you have to take into account where they're playing, because on a wide rink you have angles that are different, and your rebound control is more important on the smaller rinks. So you have to take all of this, interpret, analyze, and spew out a decision. So your farm is much better than mine. You can show mine if you want on the screen. Um, Mine
Well,
is
I think half of my farm was yours there, Frank, at one point.
yeah. I know I gave you a Hoffer and a couple of others, but what happened to my?
Cole Perfetti.
Yes, yeah. When I read up every draft on the players, and I really look at a combination of factor, and what I didn't like about Turcotte was his quickness and his speed. You can learn to skate faster, but it's rare that you can skate quicker. So
And
I
he
didn't
was
like.
drafted above before Zegras, wasn't he, in the same draft?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He was
He
ninth
was a
or eighth.
top 8 or top 9 pick. Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't like that, so I shied away from him. I was offered him in trades, and nope, no, thank you.
Yeah, your
So
farm. The one player that I'm still working to get at some point is Mr. Askarov. But my goaltending depth, I think, is really good in the farm right now. All I need is one or two of those goaltenders to be starters and have decent careers.
yeah, and you can see my benches are all goalies,
Yeah,
and I'm using laws of averages. Uh, goalies bust out at a much higher rate than defensemen and forwards. So using that logic, if I only have two goalies, chances are none of them will make the NHL. So I have the two which are required, and my four benches are goalies. Um, that's even with Hoffer being traded. Like I always keep my benches. That's my theory. Because when a goalie graduates, he's so valuable. So I can get my forwards another way. So I have six goalies. So Primo, Price was not supposed to leave so soon. So he was a seventh round pick. I like the pedigree. So I said, okay, mentally he'll be in the right frame of mind. And I said, okay, I'll gamble on him. I'm a homer too, so that's a homer pick. Askarov was a no-brainer. I traded up in the draft in the second round, which is our first farm round. So I traded up to get Askarov on his draft year. Um, if you go back up, I can't see the team anymore. So Portillo, I added as a free agent last year. Parrick, I think, is the same last year. Buffalo's goalie situation is crappy. So I said, okay, there's going to be a war between three or four prospects. So I'll take one of them. I'll be in it. Parrick is LA. So Quick is going to retire. He's what, 37, 38 now. So that was, I'd rather have a lower tiered prospect that has a way to the NHL versus a player that doesn't. But the funny thing with Parrick is he hasn't signed in LA yet. And he actually got signed by Colorado Avalanche's AHL team, but he didn't make the team, so he's in the ECHL team for the Avalanche. And in June, he can sign with anybody. So LA's probably gonna. My goal was the LA route, but now it's Colorado. But Colorado has become the non-G team with Georgiev signing for 3 years, so they don't have a established grade A number one starter. Yeah. Tarasov, Columbus, again, not a lot of goalie history. Elvis came in and took over the position. And Urson, I just added now. I didn't trust Carter Hart, as you know, but he's playing gangbusters. But I say, Carter Hart, if he has another bad year, they're probably going to cut ties with him. And then there's going to be a battle royale at Philadelphia to see who becomes the starter.
And that's the thing with fantasy hockey is you got to trust your instinct and take risks. And, Frank and I both have a lot of goalie prospects because in our league, the way it's set up, goalies are gold. Really good goalies are gold. You're not going to win without having at least two really good goalies. And that's why when I traded for Holtby, I had to give up the number one overall pick because that's the supply and demand of the good goalies even today. And we looked at my farm goalies, my current roster players right now. Some of them have graduated from the farm, like Stuart Skinner is on my team for the first year. Dawes is because, New Jersey traded for Vanacek.
Whoops.
Exactly. And if I drop him, I can't put him on my farm because he has to go through waivers.
Correct.
And someone is going to pick him up because he will be in New Jersey, I would think, at some point. So I've got to waste a roster spot on Dawes, which I'm willing to do. I'm not in a win now mode, so I can sacrifice another season or two. Craig Anderson, I had to pick up on Frank's advice because
you need starts.
He's a starter, and Buffalo is winning right now. So far, so good. Netkovic was supposed to be the goalie of the future in Carolina. They got rid of him. He's kind of a backup role in to Husso now in Detroit. So I've got a backup. Samsonov was probably going to be the backup to Matt Murray, but Matt Murray, being Matt Murray, is injured. So he's got promoted to a starting role. And the way that Jack Campbell has started, maybe Stuart Skinner gets pushed up and gets a few more games. So It's kind of worked out for my team in terms of getting goalie starts, but I don't have that Vasilevsky. I don't have that former Carey Price, the Holtby of the day. I've got to go with a patchwork group of backups that hopefully get the playing time.
Yep.
Because we have penalties. If you don't have so many starts, you get penalized. And I think it's a draft pick, isn't it, Frank?
You go, if you forfeit, but if you forfeit, you lose all the G stats. But going back to your goalies, it really illustrates just with your team the volatility of goalies. So whatever, Alex, Ned, whatever, the Detroit goalie, I can't say his last name. Yeah. So rookie of the year candidate with the Canes. They don't have the cap room, so Detroit trades for his rights. They sign him, 2-year deal. All right, we have our goalie of the future because Detroit is the no goalie. And they drafted Kosa, but that's like, what? Detroit's drafting a goalie? Really? So they didn't care. They didn't have any goalie prospects in their system of note before they drafted Kosa. So they just trade like this. But he didn't do well last year, so they go and get Husso. So now you go from a guy who's supposed to be a starter, whoops, he's a backup. Samsonov, same deal. Holtby gets pushed out of Washington, so it's Samsonov time. He was like the premier tier 1 goalie prospect. He drops the ball. Vanacek takes some start, and then inexplicably Washington got rid of both in the summertime, signed Quemper and Charlie Lindgren. So you go, okay, so Vanacek goes to New Jersey. Okay, interesting. Now we know why, because Bernier is out long term. His career is probably over, but they had Blackwood. Okay, but they gave him a contract. So, okay, so Vanacek is presumed to be the starter. If you look at the average draft positions, people drafted Vanacek before Blackwood. But Blackwood, what nobody knew, is played injured most of the year last year. He had a very bad year. He's not having a bad year this year, and he's getting the majority as a start. And Samsonov gets discarded. Nobody wants to sign him. He's a free agent. He was a premier goalie prospect. So finally, Toronto gives him 1.8 as a prove me contract, 1 year. And you knew he was going to get starts, but it's not a great situation for fantasy to have somebody that nobody wants out of the 32 teams. But we knew Murray would get hurt, maybe not as soon. And now Samsonov's actually doing well. So when Murray comes back, who knows if he gets his starting position back, you know?
And that's a wrap for episode number 2. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for a couple more episodes, which are going to be more player specific. We'll look at rookie usage and some of the players you should be picking up if they're on the waiver wire. Please leave a like, share, subscribe. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next episode.